in your device. The rest goes on and on. If you just say the word, I'll up and run.
Last time on Trying Not to Sink, we docked at a rather difficult slip at Riviera Beach Marina. We took a walk downtown in West Palm. We saw some of the most beautiful homes on the ICW, and we finally got the chance to put our toes in the sand at Fort Lauderdale Beach.
Are on stilts in the water, and it's my understanding from Captain Tim that there used to be a lot here, but there's only 6 left. And he was right, because I counted, there is 6. Isn't that crazy?
Heather, I'm not going anywhere, but if the shark drags me face first in, kind of fucked. I'm kind of screwed.
Well, I'm kind of thinking now is my opportunity. I'm thinking now is my opportunity.
To what? Take off? That's terrible. I'm telling you. It would be an awful experience. Don't do that. I'll come back as a mermaid, and I'll bring the man.
Leaving Biscayne Bay right now. It's about 7:30. I think it's Friday. I'm not sure. And we're heading down to Marathon Key, where we're going to spend a couple of days. There is some heavy winds coming in, supposedly for the next 2, possibly 3 days, 30-knot winds, and we just want to be someplace secure. So we got a slip there. I think it's called Marathon Marina. And we're going to spend a couple of days there before moving down to Key West. Now, last night we spent here in the Bay of Biscayne, and it was just beautiful. You know, it was a perfect place to anchor. You had a great view of the city, and there was all kinds of room. A little bit wavy, but not terrible or anything like that. So, you know, we're going to stop here on the way back again, I'm sure, and I highly recommend it. But anyway, we're looking forward. It's going to be a little bit of a long day for us. I think we have about 60 miles to go, maybe 70. So we're hoping to get into Marathon sometime in the late afternoon, maybe 3-4 o'clock. So that's the plan. We'll see what happens.
Yeah. One engine's out, so we're floating. It thinks there's air in the fuel line. So hopefully that's the problem, because right now we're just floating. Another kind of excitement I like.
Yeah, we just had a bit of a scare. We were just cruising along fine on the way down to Marathon, and we both heard the one engine change sounds. You really get accustomed to the sounds of your engines, the hum of them while you're underway. Anyway, we both heard it. I looked at the gauges real quick. Everything seemed fine, but then I saw the tach started to drop. The RPMs were dropping, and so I knew there was a problem. So I put it in neutral real quick, and then ran down to the engine room to see what I could find. And by the time I got there, the engine started puttering, the starboard engine that is, and died. So the fact that it took a little while to stall like that kind of led me to believe that it was a fuel starvation problem. So I immediately looked at the rate cores. The rate core is dirty as hell. and I just cleaned it maybe a week ago, and it was just packed with stuff. So I figured that was it. I switched over to the other Raycor, and I opened it up just to prime it and make sure that it had fuel in it and all that, and it was partially empty. So I started filling it, and it was taking either a really long time or not at all. I'm not sure. So I switched over to our other. I switched the starboard over to the aft tank, which is normally it's on the forward tank, just to make sure it was getting fuel from a different source. That seemed to solve the problem because the Raycor filled up. Put the lid on it. I bled the fuel lines by the main fuel filter to make sure that I was getting a flow. So after bleeding the Raycor, I went over to the fuel lines where the on-engine fuel filter is. Opened up one of the lines to bleed any air out. I knew it had to have air in it or it wouldn't have stalled the engine. So that took a couple of minutes to bleed that. I think altogether we were probably down for about 15 minutes. But once I got that bled, closed up the line, started the engine, we've been fine. We've been running now for about a half hour since this happened. So I'm not sure exactly what caused it. I know I got some bad fuel somewhere because I had to clean the Raycors already a couple of times, and they should not need to be cleaned this often. So there's something in that tank that was put in there, some bad fuel. I'm not sure whether I've got a clogged line or whether I was just not patient enough to wait for that second Raycor to fill. I can't look in it because there's a filter. All I can do is turn it on and let it rise. So maybe that was it. Maybe I just had a clogged Raycor and that's the end of it. Worst case scenario is I have a clogged line coming from the engine, from the fuel tank, up to this, the diverters that allow me to switch to different engines. And I guess I'd have to blow that out or see what the problem is. But hopefully it's just going to Raycor. When we get into the next stop, we're going to be there a couple of days. I'm going to open up a fuel line, make sure everything's flowing right, and then kind of figure it out from there. So I'll keep you updated on what happens. Right now, I'm happy that we had 3/4 of a tank in the aft fuel tank because we have plenty of fuel to get us to where we need to go. It's one of the reasons we never run them low. We always have plenty.
Yeah, my constant nagging pays off.
Yeah.
Fill it up, fill it up.
So,
Okay, so we're gonna run on that to Marathon,
Yeah.
and we'll get a chance to check it out,
Yep.
see what the hell's going on, and hopefully all else goes well. We got some waves coming tonight that are going to be pretty intense, so we're trying to get in as early as we can. But right now we're okay with the seas. Hopefully it stays like this, but it never does. Right?
yeah. Well,
So Roger out. We'll talk to you guys a bit. These come in handy. So
maybe it's not working.
it is,
No.
but you having fun?
Well, I don't know what you want me to say. I'm gonna go do it again.
All right, got a lot more times to do it. I got my eye on the water.
Yep, that was 5 more.
Did you put the cap back on?
Not yet. I'm not done.
Okay.
Nowhere near it. Got a boat coming up on us and the behind us.
No, he's leaving. I just passed him. I had to go way out of the Hawk channel, but not way out.
Are the flashlights up there?
Yeah, just 1 sec.
Okay, I have to explain what's going on here. What you're seeing is a picture of my brain finally realizing that my head is all the way up my you-know-what. So you see what happened was when I realized that I had a clogged line going to the aft tank, I of course switched both engines over to the forward tank. I thought the problem would be solved. I had 3/4 of a tank, no issue. We're only going about 40 miles or so. Anyway, I went down and randomly checked the tank a little while later and it was almost completely empty. What I had forgotten was that on a diesel engine, it takes more fuel than it needs and it sends the remainder back to the tank. I did not switch over the return. So basically I was returning fuel to the tank that I could not use. Now I always thought this was a little trickle, but apparently not. Apparently it's a lot of fuel that goes back because it completely drained my tank in a matter of about a half hour or so. So I quickly set it so that it would return the fuel to the other tank. Unfortunately, that other tank was almost bone dry at this point, and there was no way we had enough fuel in it to run both engines and get us to Marathon Key. So what did I decide to do? I decided I would figure out how much fuel we needed, which was around 50 gallons, and I started siphoning it out of the aft tank and putting it into the forward tank. Now, this sounded like an idea that would work, and Lynn's photographing me here being an idiot going back and forth. I guess I did about 10-15 trips of 2 gallons at a time and moved about 30 gallons until I finally realized that not only could I shift the return from the tank, the starboard engine, if I went to the port engine, which was running fine, and shifted that over, I could actually fill the tank that I was trying to use. So of course that worked. I switched over the return, and within a matter of 10-15 minutes I could see the tank levels rising and everything was fine. However, I did waste about a half hour, 45 minutes lugging fuel back and forth and pouring it into a open gas tank in the outside of the boat as we were chugging along at about 10 knots. So anyway, lesson learned, experience. It won't happen again, hopefully.
Experience makes you a better captain.
Yep. This is how you can tell I'm kind of new at this, because I'm sure somebody more experienced than me would have thought of this right away. It just took me a while to realize that I could have diverted the fuel to the tank that I needed. So anyway, that's what's happened. Let me get back to the story because I can show you what we actually found that was causing the problem once we got to Marathon Key. So here's a little update on our fuel starvation situation that we had on our way up to Marathon from Biscayne. It became obvious that we were getting some kind of fuel starvation because I was able to switch to the other tank, and then we were running perfectly. And well, the first thing I thought of was, we got to find the starvation point, and I knew it couldn't be the rate cores. Even though the one rate core was dirty, I switched to the other. Everything was running fine. But anyway, had it been the rate cores, the other tank wouldn't have worked either. So we knew it had to be isolated to the aft tank. I took the hose off. We have a little valve that allows you to switch from one tank to the other. I took the hose off and I blew through it, and I was able to blow through to the tank. I could hear the bubbles coming up, so there was no real obstruction there. And all that really left was this valve that we have here that, I'll show you this one. It's actually the other tank, but enables you to go from aft to forward or off. I blew into here and everything was clear to the tank. That's the feed from the tank. So it just left the valve, which seemed like a very odd thing to be not working. Q-tips up into the elbow area of the fitting to see if we can pull out any sludge. And we did get a little bit out. But we also got something else out, which was kind of surprising. And that is a tiny little wood chip. Which we pulled out of the elbow of the fitting where the valve is. And that must be the problem. So I put everything back together, and I'm going to give the engines a shot and make sure that was the problem. I can't imagine it wasn't, though. And just so you know, what we do to check to see that I'm not getting further fuel starvation is we have these gauges here on the rate core that show the pressure of I guess that the fuel's under, and it's supposed to be under the red mark there. And when at the good tank, we're getting a reading of 5, which is perfectly fine. And when I would switch to the other tank, the tank that was starving us for fuel, I would immediately start heading up into the red and climbing. So I can tell without waiting too long if there's going to be a problem. So I'm going to give that a shot now and see what happens. The engines, as you can hear, you're probably not going to be hearing me talk when we get down there, but I'm going to go take a shot at the gauge and see what's going on. being a little more complicated than I thought. The little wood piece was not going to be the end of the problems. Apparently I dislodged something when I took it out, and that's why I wasn't getting a good reading on the pressure meter. Except this time, when I switched tanks, it didn't get better. And no matter which tank I used, it was still bad. So I ended up, just figuring that it must have, I must have dislodged something and sent it downstream. And it must have been somewhere that both rate cores were getting fed from. So that would be this one main line that goes back to those valves that switch from tank to tank. I took the lines off the valves to make sure they were clear, and I was able to blow through them without any problem. Then when I tried to blow through this line, this main line here, excuse me, this main fuel line, I couldn't blow through it. So I assumed that the clog was in it, and I ended up just getting a little air pressure gun and kind of blowing everything out that was in it, putting everything back together again, and that ended up solving the problem completely, I hope. I ran the engine for about 20 minutes. I was getting a reading on the meter. It's off now, but I was getting a meter reading around 2 or 3, which is perfect. And no matter which rate core I used, and no matter which tank I used as well. So hopefully that's the end of this problem for now. And we'll know for sure once I'm running on the ocean. But right now, everything looks good. So I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to call it a day. And we were probably going to go back to that tiki bar we were at last night. That was pretty nice.